Welcome everyone to the first ever episode of the Cosmic Concerto. My name is William Hill, and this is...
Brandon.
This is Brandon. He doesn't want you to know his last name. But if you've looked at our Facebook page or Twitter at this point, then you know that we are here to talk about video game soundtracks as an art form. Not just a part of the actual video game experience, but the craft and actual composition of a video game score as being a work of music, rather than just the background music in a video game. And for our first episode today, we're going to be talking about the score for Lunar 2, specifically the version that comes with the Working Designs giant box set. If we want, maybe a little bit later, we'll talk about that's actually in the box other than this, but this is a selection score. This is not a complete score. And we've chosen this one to start with because we have some interesting things to say about what Noriyuki Iwadare has composed here. And you want to tell them what else Iwadare-san has done? Since I almost called him Mr. Iwadare, that'd be so ridiculously American.
Well, of course, you know, his biggest, I would think beyond Lunar would be his Grandia series. I mean, I think among the PS1 users in the world, that was probably the biggest thing that people probably know that he's done. And
then the Dreamcast and the PS2, because none of those games were on every system.
No,
but yeah, Grandia was a really good game, and looking back, like, actually, I watched a video about it online. It was a review video. I can't remember whose it was. But that game had an excellent score. It really did. Like, looking back at it, it actually had really good music in it.
Yes.
Like, but, and we'll get back to that. The other one, when we were doing our research for this one, we also found out that he was one of the composers that worked on the Sega CD version of Wing Commander, which I have here. My beautiful Sega CD Wing Commander. I also have Lunar up here, but leave it up there for now. So, before we get into the actual discussion, again with the research, in an interview talking about the Lunar 2 score, he talked about introducing different textures and different types of genres, different genres of music into the to a soundtrack for what's basically a fantasy role-playing game. And considering that Lunar 2 came out in '94, I believe, correct? Mm-hmm. The game came out in '94. This is on so it's coming out around the same time as Final Fantasy VI. And, well, the Final Fantasy series in general before that, the Saga series, like, fantasy role-playing games had a certain sound, and it was more in common with classical music, you know, by and large. But, you know, something we can talk about as we go into this discussion is that they also have other influences besides that. But what's interesting, but what we can go ahead and say is that there's a lot of different stuff on the soundtrack. You have the quiet piano things, you have a little bit of J-pop on there. And what you also have is funk and country western sounds on this record. So there is a lot. I mean, I can definitely see where it was coming from, bringing in a lot of different sounds to the score, but the effectiveness of it and what it actually kind of brings to the table is definitely something to be seen. So, what do you think of all these different? What do you think about the different genres being brought together for it? In terms of its effectiveness, in terms of the game.
Honestly, for the way that music sounds back then on the PlayStation and the systems before it.
Or in the Sega CD in this case.
Yes.
Originally.
I think they were quite good. Like, you mentioned the country western styles. You know, you could take games like Wild Arms and how memorable those were compared to the other games were just because of how different they sounded. You attached to them very easily just because, you know, the way the MIDI sounded, and it was just really different.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and this. Can you bring that up to a little bit larger size, and I'll go ahead and I'll address this one. But, like, I don't know if you noticed this very specifically, and forgive me, I don't know the track list by name on White Mask Funk, which is Myster's theme. The bass on this song, like the instrument used for the bass on this song, it's very distinctive. But, well, we skipped a section. But, so we'll just go ahead and say that, like, the bass on that track sounds so fake. It doesn't sound like a real bass guitar, and that's fine because it's MIDI. But then there's another track on the record that's not the J-pop song, not the actual, like, recorded pop song, but it's Ronfar's theme, which is
Wine, Women...
Wine, Women, and Song.
Yeah.
The bass on that song is it pops really well out of the actual mix, and it actually sounds more like it should be in the funk song. It sounds like a slapped bass guitar rather than the fake-sounding MIDI bass on White Mask Funk. But since we skipped the section, let's go back to the track list and talk about the tone of the record, so we can better discuss instrumentation in a second. Since this is like a compilation album, so to speak, of all these different soundtracks, because there were 5 different versions to the Lunar score. Most of them were like shorter CDs, but this is just a like cross selection featuring like all the different character specific themes and some of the more prominent pieces, like things you'd hear in towns, your boss fight music, your combat music, things of this nature, stuff you'd normally expect to hear on a soundtrack like this, rather than a complete collection where it has every piece of music in the game. Which, that said, there's not a lot of different music in the game, so this is not a complete soundtrack, but it's not far from it. Like, it's probably another CD's worth of music not on here.
Yeah, for whatever reason, they definitely don't have as much as a Final Fantasy game that expands like 3 CDs.
Or 2 CDs at the time, because I think 3 CDs, yeah, because Final Fantasy VI had a 3-disc soundtrack. It had a huge score. And Final Fantasy IV had a very vibrant score as well, given, the time of its release. But, ignoring Final Fantasy, because obviously it's not Final Fantasy, it's a completely different game, and, different composers, there's going to be a different focus. But what's odd about this soundtrack is that bringing all the different genres into play, like having a funk song followed by a country song, followed by, in this case, the instrumental version of a J-pop tune, the tone is all over the place. Like, it doesn't seem to have a very specific character to the soundtrack. I don't know, I mean, on one hand, I like the fact that there's a lot of different sounding music in the game. That's great. Yeah. But the fact that it's not consistent in any way in terms of the assembly of the album, it kind of jumps all over the place when you're listening to it. How did you experience the arrangement of the album?
Honestly, unfortunately, though I enjoy the music from the game while playing the game, away from it, it's not very memorable to me. So I really can't, I don't know. I listened to it multiple times, but I just can't.
Yeah, I've had this playing on repeat on my phone so that I could continue listening to it while I was at work and whatnot, sitting in the office at the store, and like, I'm finding myself listening to it, and like, some of it's like, this is really cool, and when did this happen in the game?
Exactly!
And that's an interesting juxtaposition, and like, you have a lot of music that's actually really good, and it's very catchy, and it's memorable, but at the same time, it's not that great. Like, it's good music, but at the same time, it's not. For example, the common form, since we have Final Fantasy as a standard, we keep referring to it, so let's just go ahead and set that as our standard for a Japanese role-playing game soundtrack.
Yeah.
In a good Japanese role-playing game soundtrack, such as Final Fantasy VI, or Final Fantasy VI. We'll go with Final Fantasy VI. No, screw that. Final Fantasy VIII. I know it came out later, but we're going to use Final Fantasy VIII because it's a much better example. You get the sense of the use of leitmotif, which for those of you who are, watching this show and you don't really know a lot about classical music, it's an opera tradition where a specific character or thematic idea will have a very unique piece of music that is played at any point in time where that character or idea is presented. Think about it in the use of Star Wars, because that's probably the most famous use of leitmotif in terms of contemporary pop culture. Whenever you hear the Force, whenever somebody's talking about the Force, you'll usually hear... Yes, didn't you like that? That was MIDI quality right there.
Yeah.
And that idea is common in the Final Fantasy series. Think about like the Fithos Lusec Vicus Vinosec from Final Fantasy VIII. That's common throughout the score. The Latin choir bit is used a few times. The music from Eyes on Me is used in several different places, and basically anytime like there's a piano track on that album, it's usually using that melody, and that is proper use of leitmotif. It's the love story idea in Final Fantasy VIII that it's trying to get across. With this game, aside from the tracks that are distinctive remakes of each piece of music, there is no call and response on the songs themselves.
That's right. Every song is pretty much self-contained.
It's isolated.
Yeah, and honestly, it really hurts it.
It does, and it's kind of disappointing in that regard. So, the tone being inconsistent, that hurts it. Not having leitmotif hurts it. Then we can basically say as like a complete score, it seems wobbly.
Yeah, it's.
Now that said, the quality of the music itself we have no problem with, and a lot of that comes back to the fact that it's very pleasing. I think that the actual way the album is composed, the way it's put together, musically speaking, going back to the use of MIDI fonts and like all the different MIDI fonts that it uses, and how it's got so much variety, it's actually really catchy most of the time.
Oh, especially because I do actually particularly like the initial world theme music.
Dun, dun,
yeah, it is very cheesy, but you know what? The moment I hear that, it's like
empowering.
It's nostalgia slap in the face.
You are going on a grand old adventure because it's got partially you don't hear so much the string synth in it. Mm. It's got all the big like the big brass sounds. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the other part of it, and this is something that's common in a lot of the scores from that time period, is the drum part. If in a landscape, in the musical, and as far as this landscape is considered, that world theme draws more on like classical music sounding instruments, mm-hmm. the horns, not so much your guitars and things like that you'll hear in Wine, Women, and Song or White Mask Funk, for example. Yeah. Or even on the J-pop songs where there's like the acoustic guitars and things like that. But you hear the big horns and stuff like that. But at the same time, what you really have holding that piece together and keeping it interesting is a basic quarter-time drum beat. And it's synthesized, but it's still there, and it's got a good punch. It's probably some of the better sounding music you got from the Sega. Because we got to note that this is a game that was originally released on the Sega CD. And then it was remade for the PS1. I don't know how much they did to change the music because I don't have a copy of Eternal Blue for the Sega CD, and I guess I could look up the music online. But this is about this soundtrack, so I just want to note that from that time period, you probably didn't hear as much really strong music on the Sega as you did there. But then again, this was a Sega CD game, so there's that to remember because they had higher quality from a CD version. So that was a tangent. Anyway, but it's that drum sound. It's that very specific drum sound, and it's there throughout the album. Like one of the things that I really do like about the album in terms of its instrumentation is that while it goes through all these different things, whenever you do have the drum track present, it's memorable. Hero versus there's a Heroes Fight. That was the name of the actual track. It's a boss fight theme.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for people who haven't played the game, and I'm sorry, Brandon, because you haven't gotten to this part, but you do fight Leo eventually.
Well, come on.
As much as he's like trolling you for the entire first disc, you knew it was going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. He's asking for it.
Yeah, he is. He's such a tool. He's so funny, though, because he's so powerful, but at the same time, he's so incompetent. When it's playing there, and when it's playing in some of the bigger boss fights, it's memorable. It's actually got a lot of energy to it, and part of it is that very specific drum sound. It's that horn sound. In tracks with the guitar tracks, I don't know how you feel about MIDI guitar tracks in these scores, because they're common. The more you think about it, the more you listen to these scores outside of the games, the more you notice how much guitar is really in them. Mm-hmm.
Actually, I was noticing that while I was playing the game. It's just the fight theme has.
Yeah, it does. Oh god, the fight theme. What's it actually called on here?
I don't know.
Brave Warriors. That was the name of the track. In that one, it actually works really well. Because it's actually weaving into, again, the more classical sounding bits better. On White Mask Funk, it sounds a little bit plasticky because it's also like relying back on that really bad bass track the really bad bass sound that they used instead of the one on Wine, Women, and Song. Or at least I think it sounds worse. It could be the exact same one I'm imagining things, and it's just the orchestration. I mean the arrangement, but the guitar on that piece sounds so much better than what you hear on other tracks. And part of that, it really is. I don't know. I don't know what it is about it, but I think it's just the combination of the string, synth, and horns.
Mm-hmm.
You know, kind of breaking up the guitar melody. I really like that. That's actually one of the better battle themes I've heard in a non-square RPG.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I can't actually remember the battle theme from Lunar, but then again, I played Lunar mostly on the GBA.
As you've heard, that was a long time ago.
Yes, that it was. I mean, I played a little bit of Lunar on the Sega CD since I've gotten it, but I haven't played through it, which is a shame because it's really good.
And not to get on the sidetrack, but they actually do change quite a bit from the original to what they put on the GBA to make it a little more kid-friendly.
They did. Oh god, they did. I mean, Lunar 2 couldn't have been translated to the GBA and the port and have quite the same effect. And so much of that is funny, but now that gets into talking about the game, and this is the score. That said, the game is a lot of fun, and if you nothing else, you should look up all of Ruby's character portraits, because they're so much of my enjoyment of the game. Because she's like a lolcat, but not stupid. What was that? The piano tracks, or the more piano-driven tracks, Somber Memories, for example, Heart-Shaped Tears. These are, I wouldn't say they're the most memorable piano pieces in a video game score, but they have a good sound. They go for this nice mixture between like an actual keyboard background and electric piano almost, and not so much for like a big grand piano sound like something you'd hear from the Final Fantasy scores more specifically. But I guess, you know, we're just kind of like beating a dead horse when you get to talking about the piano parts, because piano parts really just sound the same on all, like across the board. It's not until you break out like harpsichords that you get into really interesting keyboard orchestration, and that's not an instrument you hear so much in this game.
No.
But I guess that goes back to Iwadare wanting to avoid the traditional fantasy score. Now, that said, do you think he succeeded? Do you think that he stays away from all the classical music trappings? Because I think with the Star Dragon theme, that's not true. I think that at that point you are really digging back into the classic fantasy sounding soundtrack.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, a lot of the game isn't exactly non-fantasy. I mean,
true. But, you know, if he's trying to stray, if we're talking about straying, if we're talking about his goal of straying away from a classic fantasy sounding soundtrack, and he's using all these different other things like the funk and the... I actually have one more piece I need to mention that kind of grates on me. Since, I guess I'll jump right into that because I kind of lost my thread there. Lamina's theme. It's called Holding On. I don't know why I forgot the track title because I've been wanting to talk about this one. I don't like the way this song sounds. It's actually one of the things I actually have a problem with on the soundtrack in terms of its tone, and that's... I think that Lamina's theme is actually kind of grating. It sounds like something that comes right out of a mid-90s anime score. Yeah, and not in a good way. Not in like the Trigun or Cowboy Bebop kind of way. We're talking like in the worst moments of a Neon Genesis Evangelion kind of way.
it does.
You know exactly what track I'm talking about now that I said it, don't you? Oh god.
It's so stereotypical to anime that it is ridiculous.
Yes, and I get it. I mean, this game has a lot of anime cutscenes, and it has the same... It has some of the same trappings of, like, the same sense of humor that a lot of anime does. Like the scene where Hiro has Lucia follow him into the bathhouse.
Yes.
And Ruby jumps in front of his face. That is classic anime. And, you know, it's funny.
It was.
Because you like Ruby. Yes. How can you not like Ruby, really? And it's funny. It really is. But That song drives me insane. Now, Lamina doesn't bother me so much because I kind of like where her story arc goes, and where I'm at in the game anyway. And she actually kind of reminds me of Anya from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Because she's obsessed with money whenever she starts working for Giles in the magic shop.
Oh.
I think it's funny. I think it actually works. I mean, that was like, this came first, but that's what it reminded me of. So, let's actually go on and talk about the success of this as a video game score. You might want to move that off. Sorry, viewers, we are still running on an outline because this is the first episode. Welcome to ironing out the kinks. So let's talk about this as a game score. Rather than, let's get past the instrumentation and let's talk about how it works as a game score. As background music, dead on, it's effective.
Oh yeah, definitely. I thoroughly enjoy the music while I'm playing the game. It keeps me immersed. It keeps me still wanting to play.
Yeah, and again, going back to that nice drum sound, whenever you're in battle, you're in the move, you're right in the movement with it, you're right in the groove, you find the rhythm of what you're doing in the battle, and you're playing the game. Outside the game, I mean, it's battle theme music.
But I can't find myself wanting to listen to it outside the game, unfortunately.
Which is definitely the difficult part of bringing it up as an individual game score, because it's very effective in game. All the music actually matches every scene that it's in. No character has a musical theme that does not match the scene that they're using it in.
Yes.
Because with Ronfar, I have no idea if that's how you actually pronounce his name. He has a really silly name.
How I said it when I first read it.
So his characters, I like him. He's kind of drunk all the time,
which is odd because he's supposed to be basically a priest.
Yeah, and that's
he's supposed to be a holy man,
but he's holier than the actual holy man in this game.
Yes.
Please donate $100 to the Church of the Chosen.
You talk about the chick being money hungry. Good Lord!
But at least she's comical and she's not just like.
It's like I can't go to a town in this game and expect to get healed because everyone wants money.
You know all the statues; they're standalone heal.
I know, but that's not the point. I should be able to go to the church and get healed. No, can't do that. Not free.
I want 100 silver for that, please. So every town seems to have a nice melody to it, and it's all very pleasant. It is very pleasant music to play a game on, especially a Japanese role-playing game, which always should have a great score. Traditionally speaking. Going back to Dragon Warrior has a good score. I mean, but, it's a great game score. I think that Iwadara actually was very successful in creating a memorable, enjoyable collection of songs for this video game.
Yes. While you're playing is completely perfect. I mean,
no, it's not quite perfect. Holding On still plays in the game.
I thoroughly do enjoy listening to the music while I'm playing the game.
And, even then, it's like, the tones are, it's right for the tone of the game.
Yes.
It's just whenever you take it outside the game that things start to fall apart. And this is where we actually have to note that what we're listening to when we're not playing the game. This CD that came with the Working Designs Collector's Edition of Lunar 2, this is a CD. This is an album of music. A piece of art designed, sequenced to be listened to right down the bottom. Right down, top to bottom. And whenever it's brought to us as an album, it still isn't bad music. It really isn't. There are some really good tracks on here that I can actually listen to outside of the game and enjoy it. Things like White Mask Funk, and I like the piano pieces. A Star Dragon theme is really good. I even like the battle theme. If I'm in the right mood to be listening to it, I enjoy listening to it because, again, the fake guitar melody sounds pretty good, and I like how it's broken up with the more percussive horn and string parts. That works for me. That said, I'm not a big fan of J-pop, and that's my opinion. Obviously, that's not something that everybody. I know I play Japanese video games and I don't like J-pop. I'm an anomaly. And I have nothing negative to say about J-pop, because J-pop is actually very complex and interesting music on an actual arrangement level. I don't like the way it sounds though. Usually it's a bit too chipper for me. And
it is very, very cheerful. Those are some happy people.
And that's great! Oh, power to them. Maybe I listened to too much heavy metal and that's skewed my tastes, but come on. I mean, I can actually call out one piece of J-pop music that two that I actually really like. One of them is from the end of the Chrono Cross soundtrack.
Yeah, I actually do thoroughly enjoy that.
That song's gorgeous.
Yes.
That song, Tears, right here. I love that song. The other one is Cosmic Dare from the What Planet Is This? Not What Planet Is This? It's the single soundtrack from Cowboy Bebop, the movie.
Okay.
The one you have that you got for $7 and I've been jealous ever since. And I've got to turn off the screensaver for when we're doing this. So it's not even that I can't appreciate what J-pop is, but the J-pop songs in this one are just fluff.
Yeah, they are. They're not very good. They're stereotypical J-pop that's not got a lot.
They're Sutakadini quality J-pop songs.
I mean, there are going to be some people who enjoy it, because I imagine most people who enjoy anime are going to like these songs just because
they like J-pop.
They like J-pop.
And it's not bad. They're not bad songs. It's not like Taylor Swift popped up on this CD and I, projectile vomited all over my dashboard while listening to this. So, exactly, your expression right there, that's exactly what I mean. It's not terrible, but it's not something I particularly enjoy. And whenever, since we're going back to the track list here, Eternal Blue pops up between Heroes Fight, a boss fight theme, and Golden Voice, which is not matching in tone either. You have intense, relaxed pop, unsettling. You have three completely different emotions here, and that's where the album probably could have been improved by better sequencing. For example, whenever we talked about how this show's really going to unfold and what we're going to talk about, you mentioned the idea of a soundtrack telling the story itself.
Yes.
Chrono Cross, for example, tells the story perfect. It almost mirrors the perfection of the story arc in the game. Final Fantasy VIII score is another one it unfolds very fluidly across 4 discs. The tracks don't come up exactly in the same order as they do in the game. And that's assembling an album for listening to on its own.
Yes.
That's how you build a video game soundtrack.
Yes. Rather
than a collection of songs that were from a video game. That's what this really boils down to. This is not organized in such a way as to be memorable as an album. Because it's so all over the place, you kind of get musical whiplash.
Which is unfortunate because there are good songs.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm definitely not knocking what this guy did recording this music, because
I don't think he put together this album.
I'm now wondering if this is actually a guy. Can you make sure that we're not being really offensive? I
think it's a little late for that.
It is, isn't it?
You called him a guy too many times.
You're right.
You should feel bad.
I have brought dishonor among my house. I'm sorry. Talk about doing bad research. Okay, we're just gonna move on.
No, we know he's the guy. We saw a picture.
Did we?
I was just making you think that,
Jerk. So it's not the best game score, obviously, but it's there's a lot of good music on here, but it is not a well-assembled album.
No, it definitely is. It does not allow me to, when you were to play a song on the game, I would recognize it. If you were to play it on the album, I would recognize it, but I wouldn't be able to tell you the name ever.
Yeah. Definitely not. And that's sad whenever I can tell you the name of a track on a 3-disc soundtrack.
Exactly.
And
I
this
can
is a
pretty much
single
name
disc.
any track off the Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross soundtrack. I can name any of them.
I can't do it with Chrono Trigger.
I can do it most with Chrono Trigger.
And that's mostly because there's a lot of tracks that are provided more as atmosphere. And they kind of sound the same. And I'm mostly talking about the ones that take place in 2300 AD.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But, now that beyond that, it's if we're going to talk about the article of the album itself, I'm a little disappointed that Working Designs didn't take the extra 2 seconds to make this packaging for an actual CD jewel case. Because I mean, I'm not completely offended by the LP style, but it's not an LP style case. It's got this. It's actually designed so that you can put your demo disc from Vanguard Bandits in the other side.
Yeah. And
as a result, you kind of take away from this being a CD case for an album, and that kind of bothers me. Otherwise, it's got good art. It's got Hiro and Lucia with Ruby sitting on his shoulder. And, I mean, I like the art in the game. I know it's the anime style.
Yeah.
That doesn't bother me. I like it.
That never has.
But it's gorgeous art.
Yes.
Like, the characters are actually designed to look like they're going on a quest rather than they're going to Comic-Con. Like a lot of modern Final Fantasy character designs are. Just very disappointing the way that characters look now in games that have an anime art style. Because the costumes are so ridiculous.
They are.
So many times I feel like they're designed trying to challenge the people who do cosplay. It's like, oh, you can't do this one. Like, you can make this. Like, this looks like she came from another world. And you totally can believe this guy's going on an epic adventure.
You're still going to look ridiculous if you wear what she wears. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but you won't look as ridiculous with your giant red nurse hat on.
Yeah, at least you're not carrying a gigantic 9-foot sword.
Yeah, and I don't mind the 9-foot sword part. It's the... You know what really bothers me?
With the 9-foot hair?
That's a big part of it, but in Final Fantasy XII, Vaughn wears a vest. Dude's wearing a vest that comes up to his ribs in negative 20-degree weather.
Just trying to be fair, because of all those years they made women wear like that, okay?
You know what, you're right. Rydia did have the sluttiest costume in Final Fantasy IV.
Yeah, and you should feel bad, because not but 2 seconds earlier she was a kid.
You're right. You're basically a pedophile.
Congratulations.
Good job, gamers.
What I would say about the packaging for Lunar 2, going back, at least they gave us a track listing.
Oh, God,
the
yes.
original Lunar collectors, they gave us something similar, but there was no track listing.
Really?
There's no track listing.
You think? I guess that's something that they improved on.
Yeah,
that was the first.
So that was definitely an improvement. They gave us a track list. You were guessing before.
That sucks. I don't have Lunar 1 on the PS1 yet. I want it. Delicious, tasty, giant box sets. Wow, that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
That's terrible. God, that is so awful. Like, the more I'm like sitting here processing that, it's like, that is the dumbest thing.
Yeah.
Especially if you get in a situation like whenever I got the Final Fantasy X soundtrack, all the track titles, whenever I was trying to rip them to my computer,
Japanese.
They're Japanese.
Good luck.
Good luck. I went online and I got the translated titles and I plugged them all in. So like that, you couldn't even do that just like reading out of the liner notes. That's terrible. But at least they did that. That's nice. And it's in English, which is a lot of the stuff we're going to cover on this show. Not going to be in English because they're imports.
Oh, we're in trouble.
Yeah, nah, we're going to be fine. We just won't be able to refer to the thing as much. We're going to have to do better prep work than this. But all in all, you know, given the nature of how you would acquire this album, I can't say that it's not a good perk to have.
Oh yeah, definitely. In terms of like, you know, if you were to buy this, the collector's box.
And if you're buying Lunar 2 on the PS1 and you're actually a collector, and if you're buying Lunar 2 on the PS1, that's most likely the case, you're going to be very happy because this is a great box set. I mean, hold that for a minute. It has a spot for if you have Vanguard Bandits. They've designed it where you can put your demo disc in there and you have the complete Lunar 2 experience there. Lunar. It's Lunar, but we're weird, I guess, and can't pronounce normal things. You get a very nice double disc box, which also has a making of disc. Ah! Stupid jewel tray. Hold on to my disc. I haven't watched the making of yet. Have you?
No.
I need to. I really want to watch it.
I didn't know it was there.
I knew it was there, and I would like to know what's on it. And if you don't know much about Working Designs, but if you're watching this show, if you found this show already, you're probably a collector if you like video game music, so you probably know this part. The Working Designs discs were, whenever they published a game, they published multiple formats. So every disc design, so like they would all have a different disc design. I think there was 3 or 4 different iterations for Lunar 2. So that's really cool, and I can't remember if the case art was different. I'd have to go back and look at that again. There's a great website called Reivew. That guy has every PS1 and Saturn game, if I'm not mistaken. And he has great like photo documentation of some of the games. It's a really cool website for giant nerds like me. You also have the paper map. It's not the cloth map from the previous one, but it's a map, and that's pretty cool. And probably the most absurd but awesome thing, and I say this not having ever done cosplay, is it actually comes with Lucia's pendant from the game itself, and I still think that's really cool. I don't get what the character standees are for. Sorry, Victor Ireland, I don't understand it. And then another one of the really cool things that they did was they did this like leatherette instruction book with like the blue line pages in theirs. It's just like the biggest instruction manual for such a simple game. Because I mean, by all means, Lunar is a very easy to understand how to play a game. You walk around and you press X to kill things. There's actually an interview with the scenario writer in here, which I read whenever I first got it. I forgot it was in here though. The last little bit's also a strategy guide for the first part of the game. So there's a lot of cool stuff in here. Really, there is. I've got a lot of lovely things to say about what they've done as a collection. So, given that if you're buying Lunar 2, you're going to be buying the soundtrack most likely, unless you buy an incomplete copy, I recommend it. I mean, I can't say that I would hunt down this soundtrack on its own, like to buy this as a CD.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do it. Not this version anyway. Maybe one of the other 5 versions would have a better assembled collection of music. But this one, on its own, I couldn't recommend it. As part of the collection, absolutely. This is a wonderful collection. The game itself is fantastic. I've been playing it pretty much non-stop with what little bit of gaming time I've had this week. I love it. Again, the score works great for background music in terms of the game. Not so great as an album. Could you fix that again? Sorry, I need to turn that off next time. What about you? What do you take away from this one? What do you think?
Pretty much the same. When it comes to playing the game, I love the music. But when it comes to being outside the game and experiencing the music in a totally different way, it's not something that I'm going to seek out and do probably ever again. I mean, I cannot see myself listening to the soundtrack outside the game. I don't find it to be very memorable. The track list is all over the place. Just
Promenade's not something you want to listen to.
Overall, it's just not something that I'm going to do very often.
I feel so bad saying this because there's so much good about this soundtrack.
But that's not to say there is anything. It's just there are some scores in the world that the only way you're going to enjoy them is during the game.
Is with the game. Yeah.
That's just how it is. It needs the game to make it better. It's just all there is to it. It doesn't work without the game.
Absolutely. Well, this is a rather melancholy way to start the series off, isn't it? With an average score.
Yes, that basically is good but average at the exact same time, which is odd.
It is, yeah. But that's kind of how it is sometimes. That's kind of how so many of these scores are going to end up being. But that is the Lunar 2 working design soundtrack. And we can't say exactly what we're going to do next, but we will be doing another episode. And then another episode. This has been the Cosmic Concerto for episode 1. Bye, everybody.